Thank you for coming. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First, our thank yous to our major partners for the festival, Telefilm, ACOA, the Government of Nova Scotia, the City of Halifax, and a special thanks to Cineplex for the theaters. We're also sponsored today, as you can see, the RBC Emerging Artists and Warner Brothers Discovery Access Canada. They are putting this on.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was putting lip balm on.
Same.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming out. And like I said, we are filming it as well, so it'll be available online after this. We'll chat for about an hour, and then we'll throw to questions. So if we have some audience questions, that would be awesome. I'll introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Joline. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a filmmaker residing in what is known today as Halifax, Nova Scotia. I want to say that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'm an Indigenous person myself as well, but I'm not Mi'kmaq, so I want to thank the Mi'kmaq people for allowing us to be here today, and we honor and respect the ongoing relationship between nations. Our panel today is called Content Warning, Challenging Themes in Filmmaking. And the content warning, I think, was put a little bit as like tongue-in-cheek, but I will actually give a real trigger warning because there's some stuff we're going to talk about that has to do with assault and sexual assault in some cases. So if anybody is triggered at any point, feel free to walk out. We won't think anything of it. And also on the panel, if anyone wants to switch the topic or is uncomfortable with the question that I ask, this is a safe space. Just say so, and I'll move on and not make it a big deal. So, hope you're ready to get uncomfortable, because we're going to talk about uncomfortable topics.
I'm already uncomfortable.
Okay, so I will start by can I just get everyone to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the film that you have playing here. Koumbie, we can start with you.
Oh, great. My name is Koumbie. I use she, they pronouns. What was the question? I directed and co-wrote a movie called BYSTANDERS, which premieres on Thursday, which is in 2 days, I think. And it is about a group of friends who grew up together, and they go for an annual winter weekend away, and one of them is accused of a sexual assault, and they are forced to deal with what that means and what they need to do about it.
I'm Tara Thorne, she, her. My film is called Compulsus. It premiered on Saturday night and is streaming at the festival through Thursday. And it is about a lesbian vigilante who beats up abusive hipster men at night.
Those go well together. I like that. My name's Scott Jones. I use he, him pronouns. I directed and wrote a short film that screened last night as part of the Real East Coast Gala event, and it's called Coin Slot. It's kind of like a filmic self-portrait in relation to a homophobic attack that I experienced almost 9 years ago.
Thank you all. Scott, I'll start here. I'm going to ask this question to everybody, but you just called it a self-portrait. So as far as I understand, I think all of your works are technically a work of fiction. You're playing role. I mean, Scott, in your case, you're in the film, but you're playing somebody with a different name. It's not Scott. How close is this story to your real life?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like metaphor, like and symbolism in it, and it was. Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted it to be fiction, but I also knew it was like very, very close. And I think in hindsight, it was a really silly film to like do my first short film as, because it nearly like did me in. It was very, very hard to go into the edit suite and like see myself, first of all, acting, like, and then like acting out my trauma, and then having creative conversations with other creatives about what made sense, but it's all around my own trauma. So very much so, I'd say like it was 80% real and connected to that particular time in my life. All of those things, the real things, were things that I tried to do. The barriers were barriers that I'd experienced, and yeah, so very, very close.
I guess getting notes or feedback on a story is vulnerable and hard enough as a filmmaker, but when it's your your personal drama is really on the screen, it might feel like an extra level of vulnerability.
It was, well, okay, so I was clearly late today. I was 10 minutes late. And part of the, argument and discussion around the film was the length of time. It's 17 minutes. It's very long, short. People kept telling me festivals don't like to program anything beyond 10 minutes as a short. And I just kept saying, I don't care. I want people to sit with how long certain tasks take. And they're not even close to how long all those tasks take to get dressed, to catheterize, to do these things. And so that was hard, and there were, at every angle, it was like, we need to cut this, trim this. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm sorry. I want people to see this. And also, I don't know, that quote about films being like a need, not a want. Like, you need to make it. And I was like, I need to make it, and I need to make it in this way. And so that was what the arguments usually were around. Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, I think the pacing was great. I did not watch that and think, oh, I wish any of this was shorter. Like, it felt very deliberately slow-paced, which I think worked really well. Tara, your film isn't based on truth. Do you wish it was, though?
I would be a terrible secret vigilante because I cannot run. I'm very klutzy. And I was on the radio for 15 years. I have a very recognizable voice. It wouldn't work. But yeah, I do wish.
Is this, I mean, it's not based on a true story, but is it based on what event or thought or feeling did you have that kind of
Precipitated,
thank you,
if you will,
inspired you to write this?
And by the way, our lead's name is Wally, and she is gay and a freelance writer in a shabby North End apartment. All of those. It was a series of things. It was, my go-to joke is a life long of patriarchal survival. Like, we all live under that system. But there's sort of a series of events, starting with when Seth MacFarlane hosted the Oscars. In 2014, he sang a song called "We Saw Your Boobs." And it was about all of the actresses who had done topless scenes. And they had to sit there and kind of take it and be good sports, and it made me very, very angry. And then there was the Hollywood Me Too with Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby and all of those guys. And then Giangameshi was really the big one that made me kind of go, oh, this is actually closer to me than I thought it was. I thought I was naive. I naively thought that a lot of my friends were lucky like I was and nothing bad had happened to them. And the Giangameshi trial, which was live tweeted, and a lot of people in Halifax were invested in that because a lot of people knew Lucy. And I had also worked with one of the other accusers when I worked on Q. It all came out for people, and I found out how many people that I knew that were just carrying around what I think has to be the very horrible pain. Like, it's a normal thing. They have to, like, this horrible thing was perpetrated against them, and they have to walk around with it all day. And I thought, what if women were as violent as men? There you go.
Then you get compulsus.
That's right.
Yeah. Koumbie, your film has similar themes to Tara's, but it feels very different.
Koumbie's also in my movie.
Oh, yeah, it's a small town.
I'll just say, when I read the script for Compulsus, when I was casting it, which I was thrilled about, I almost immediately emailed Tara to be like, I just want you to know, Taylor and I have been working on a script
We're not
for a
ripping
really
off
long
your
time.
idea.
It already exists. So the similarities that you will eventually see, it just, I think, was in the air or something.
Yeah, for sure. But it is like similar themes, but it feels like a very different film. It's a different watch. It's a different feeling, and you're certainly going into more of a gray area question.
Yeah, so you didn't actually ask a question, but I'm just going to respond to what you said. I think very similarly to Tara, all of those things were happening in the world around us. And I remember I was working on a show called Slut with Lunacy Theater, and it was around rape culture. And this was before the Weinstein scandal and before Me Too went viral. And I remember having these moments of like, oh, these experiences that I've had actually every single person I know that I was having these conversations with have had similar ones. And I'll never forget, someone was talking about something, and one of the other women in the cast was like, "That's not sexual assault." And we were like, "Oh, actually, yes, it is." And we watched her like have this realization that this experience that she'd had actually was not okay. And that really stuck with me.
She sort of changed her mind in front of you? Or?
Yeah, like she was like, that's not sexual assault. And the group of us were like, it actually is.
Oh, wow, what a hard thing to sit there and see. And then so she had to go, oh, I was assaulted.
Yeah, so she had to
that's-
realize. And I think actually a lot of us had experiences like that where it was like, those times in a club where someone grabbed your butt or something like that and being like, oh, that was actually harassment. That wasn't just club culture. Like that actually was an invasion. And that's like a minor version of it, but they stack up for sure. And for us, because we were doing that show, one of the statistics that kept being discussed was 1 in 4 women has been sexually assaulted. 1 in 4 women. And who knows where that number came from? Who knows if that's even a real number? I think we all realized it's probably much more than that. But at the time, it was like 1 in 4 women. And so then our question was like, well, if it's 1 in 4 women, it's not like it's just one dude who's doing that to everybody. So if it's 1 in 4 women, like the number of dudes who are doing this must be so much higher than we have any understanding of. And it means that it's people that we know. It means that it's people that we love. And so we got kind of obsessed with that idea.
It seems like your film is sort of it really could be a direct answer to Me Too. But from what I understand, I think you started writing it even before the Me Too movement.
Yeah, we actually put it away for a little bit during the Me Too movement because we felt like our whole thing was like, no one's talking about this. And then everyone was talking about it. So we were like, we don't really need to throw our voice into the void. And then that other angle of it just kept sort of speaking to us. And we felt like there was still a conversation to be had there.
The gray area angle, you mean? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I'm like scared of saying gray area because I want to be very clear. I don't think that there's a gray area on sexual assault, but there's
The movie does.
The movie does.
Yeah.
Well, the movie thinks there's a gray area on what happens next. I like to think.
Okay.
Like I think for me the gray area is around accountability and responsibility and next steps as opposed to the
Yes
thing.
or no if that's assault or that's not
Yeah.
assault. Right, gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm talking now about like kind of re-traumatizing people that may have been, like, did you worry about your actors? You have an ensemble cast. You have a lot of actors that are going to be dealing with subject matter that I don't know if anyone there has ever been is a survivor of anything, right? So did you have to have some of those conversations? Like what did you put in place for people's mental health and safety?
So I actually started training to be an intimacy coordinator, and it was specifically because of this film and wanting to be that on the film. And then within like the first class, I realized that was never going to work because there's a power dynamic and your director just can't be your intimacy coordinator. But I continued taking the courses because they were blowing my mind and shaping every other aspect of my life in a way that I was felt was really good. So that 100% informed how we approached the movie. I think, honestly, in the callbacks, we talked about, what the concept was and what it would be like to be in a movie like this and what it would mean and what doing intimacy would mean and, like, that kind of stuff. Kind of at every step, we tried to take this, like, intimacy lens to the whole project, even in terms of scheduling and things like that. We were very careful to say, we can't create a safe space. We don't know what everyone's triggers will be. It's not possible for us to create that. But what we were trying to create was a brave space where people felt like they could have any feelings that possibly came up and know that they would be taken care of in whatever way that meant. And sometimes that was even like, are you going to have some sessions with your therapist before we start shooting? Or like, what's your aftercare going to look like and stuff like that. But absolutely.
I love that you're taking the intimacy coordinator stuff because, yeah, we definitely need intimacy coordinators We will
Yeah.
have more and more of them, hopefully.
I will also say I'm taking it and I'm loving it so much that I'm continuing the training, but they also offer, I think it's like artist conscious training. So it's training not just if you want to become a coordinator, but just if you want to learn more about these concepts and just
Oh,
like
great.
as an artist.
Improve your own approach.
Your own work. And that's for actors, directors, right? Like it's for anybody. And I'm,
Regarding sexual assault or any kind of trauma?
I think, well, it is specifically regarding intimacy. So I think it's most, and it's not even sexual assault. Like it's just sex scenes and intimacy of any kind. They even talked about how like, you know, a close up on someone's ear can be intimate and sensitive depending on how you feel about your ear. And so like, it's not just about sex scenes, but.
Gotcha. That's good to know. That's good to know. Scott, were you, speaking of like taking care of people and their mental health, were you ever worried about taking care of yourself because you're putting so much of yourself on that screen and then you're writing and directing it and you're acting it and it's, you know, there are so many parallels to your real life drama.
Yeah, like I said, it was, I kind of dove into it. It was a need, but then, you know, I've been to labs since, and, you know, they've said, you know, don't choose your own life for the first project that you do. And I'm like, well, been there, done that, and I agree. Like, I shouldn't have. But when it was done, and like now seeing it in the world, it feels cathartic. But the production was not. It felt very cathartic. It was the post that like really affected me, because the musical component, I could speak that language, and I loved like, working with the composer. But sound, I was way out at sea, and editing, I was working with just this really talented editor who I know from dog training camp. His sister was in it, and she died 6 months later, and we were really close, and his twin. So I knew that I wanted him as an editor because he had a closeness to, you know, people with disabilities. But both of us, I think, were, you know, I'm going to grieve this for the rest of my life. And so I think we were in this like weird place, and then sound, it just was going into it with folks who had a certain closeness to it, and then some who had none at all. And the sound, I was just like, this is so hard, and we're arguing, and I was at the end of my rope because editing took so long. Then music was great, but then sound, and it was just like having to rewatch it, like, you know, editing in relation to my acting out this trauma, and then every step of the way was a rewatching, you know, and seeing like, okay, yeah, the color works here, and I have to watch it again to make sure that the music works here, the sound works here, and it was just like, if we got into like heated arguments, I was like, I am so done with arguing about this, and it's that thing about creating something, and when you're with a team, but if it's something so personal, you're kind of like, I need this to be the way that I envisioned it, but it didn't turn out the way that I envisioned it, but it still is something that I'm proud of, but it was very hard. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I echo that so much. I very thoroughly
Yeah.
relate.
How hard.
Just it's so hard. I feel like you have to be precious with it, because otherwise, like, what's the point? But then you can't, because it's this thing that now exists outside of your brain, like, and so it's going to be changed. So that, yeah.
But when others get precious about it, you're like, no, this is my like precious gem, and like, but then you're like, no, it's a team, and like, it's only going to grow if there's space for others to play with it. But play with something that's so.
Yeah.
Right.
And Scott, did you have a hard deadline that you were trying to hit, or did you at some point walk away and like
I
think
had a
about it
hard.
and then come back?
I had a hard deadline because of the sound. I did, because everyone was doing it at a reduced rate, and she was like, I need to do this either here or we're going to wait for 6 months. And I was like, I can't have this hang on. And the editing started late, and so we really only had like 2 months to do the edit, and he was doing a few other projects at the same time, like features and shorts, and so I didn't get. He was like imploring that we take more time and just like, and I'm sure it would have been a stronger film, but I was like, I literally cannot, for the sake of my mental health, prolong this, because I'll then be obsessing over it in the meantime. Right after production, I was like looking at the footage and was like, great, we have nothing. Great, I love my life. This is gonna be a horrible film, and I need the edit to start now because I can't stay up all night like trying to piece it together and make it look good on Final Cut, which is so expensive, like all that, and so finally it was the sound, but the sound ended up being a very important part, and I learned a lot. But this is after we've been doing a doc with the NFB about the attack, feature doc. I mean, my friend did, and we just did a play, I Forgive You, at Artistic Fraud. And interesting enough, it's the acting out that is really cathartic. It's the leading up to it, which is the reverse. Or no, it's the same. Sorry. That was so hard. But then once we got on stage, it was like, this is life. This is giving me life. This is helping me heal. Whereas the other stuff, sometimes it would and sometimes it wouldn't. So, yeah. Sorry.
As far as like, do either of you feel like when you're thinking about deadlines, how much do you rush? How much do you hold off and sit with the things a while? Tara, do you have anything to say on that? Like were you trying to hit a hard deadline? Okay.
Yeah, this time last year, the movie was supposed to be done, and that never happens. And I was like, I'm going to New York City for 2 weeks. Fuck this pandemic. I don't care. And I did. And guess what? I did for the first 3 nights in New York. Watch my own movie because the sound mix, and I love you, James. But you can't.
Oh, did you both have James?
Did you also use James O'Toole?
Yes, we did.
He's a lovely man.
Love
Comes from indie rock. I love that. But you can't not watch the whole thing. You know what I mean? So I was like, here I am in New York. It's so hot. Why? It's October. And watching my own movie because we were trying to hit this deadline that turned out that, we got rejected. But you have to, here's the thing. I'm a journalist, or I was. You need deadlines or you won't do it. You need something, or you'll just sit with it forever. So you do, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a festival deadline, which is what we were doing and what a lot of people end up doing. But you need something, or else, just like you said, you'll be in the ether forever, and you'll never finish it.
Koumbie, what about you? You were.
This
This will be the first time you're showing your film.
Yep. I never felt like we were going for a specific festival. I think we were sort of a little bit more like crew schedule wise because our editor, who is so incredible and I love her so much. You used her. She has like a full-time job and she actually takes like time off when she's doing features like this, which was incredible because it meant that we had an assembly like 2 days after we wrapped, which was crazy.
So she
And
was
your shoot-
assembling as you were shooting.
And your shoot was like very, very, very quick, right? I heard that it was like.
I mean, it's the same. Yeah.
But
15 days, baby.
15 days.
What?
Yeah, 15 days. It's like the Canadian classic time, I think. And then certain people get.
Toronto, they always get 20, but it seems like.
Some people here get 20, but when you're like trying to pay people, and I think that just 15 seems to be the
We
number.
have smaller budgets here most of the time.
Yeah. I mean,
so something has to be. You can't have as many days, or if you have a lot of days, you can't have as much crew, or something.
something has to give, and I'm trying to see the silver lining in that I would really love to move into TV directing and talking to folks about what people are looking for in a TV director. It's like, can you go fast? And so I feel like the fact that I can say, well, I made this movie in 15 days kind of helps prove that. So that's my little silver lining. We'll see.
It's not. It's a huge talent. Like I was like, whoa. And Melanie, I was saying, yeah.
I mean,
was
I
like,
also could
wow.
only do it because of folks like Melanie Wood, who was our first AD. It's like truly
Also
the
mine.
only way. She's
Share a lot of people.
fantastic.
Just as a side note, I made a weekly newspaper for 19 years of my life. Give me any time frame, I can do it. I don't care.
I will also say that we had a lot going for us in that it was like the same actors in the same location, and so that it's like location changes really. Like when I watched Compulses finally the whole way through, I was like, oh my god, like the scale, because you're hopping around.
It
So every
was a
time there's a
mistake.
new location, I'm impressed.
It was a mistake.
What was a mistake?
All the locations. The
Yours
next
15 days?
Yeah. The next movie has 2 locations on purpose. I don't want to move.
I will say,
Chamber pieces for the win.
you did have a lot of montages. And
I will also not have montages, which I hate.
I think maybe
I
we have.
love
Are
them.
some people here students or emerging filmmakers? So that's a good tip. Is if you're writing, a montage is a great way to write.
It's a very
passing of
screenwriterly
time.
thing to do. Yeah.
But then when you're actually filming it, you're like, this is like 10 shots.
We had 3, and I hated shooting every single one of them. I really did. It was our first day of shooting montages. I was like, well, check it off. Hate it. Next.
No, I mean it works great on in your film on camera on the screen. It's great, but I know how hard that must have been to be like another montage. We got to film.
But sometimes there's some montages that are like, quick, like in the same location, and it's just like
More like
very,
jump
very
cuts.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's what I thought too. Very simple. No. Every shot. Same amount of setup time.
Oh,
Right. Unless
And
it's like
I
the
ju-
same
I just
shot
went
and you
through
jump
it.
cut,
Yeah,
shooting
like picking
the
up.
exact same shot.
Yeah, there's a way to have a montage that doesn't add time, but it's like every single thing that has to be changed in every shot will add minimum 15 to 20 to 30 to sometimes an hour long just of setup time. And if you have to change, then anyways. I feel like I didn't answer your actual question, which was about the timeline. No, I just, I'm sure I will live to regret this, but we spent like 5 years on the script and on shooting, and it was so nice to come right out of shooting it, going right into post, and then working with Amy. And I think it wasn't so much a festival deadline. I just like was ready to be done, and like our movie is quite topical, as we know. And I just knew that because the conversation's always changing, it was like, it should have been done like a year ago, 2 years ago kind of thing, but we just really wanted the script to be ready, and life happens. And so I felt like a desire
Give
to be
yourself a
done.
deadline, yeah.
I was
have a
scared
thing.
about topic. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just briefly. I was scared about topicality too because Promising Young Woman came out at the end of 2020, so it won the Oscar in 2021, and I was like, I don't want to be the cheap Canadian corpse that washes up after this movement's over. I think we missed it. I think it's
Oh.
gonna be okay.
She didn't kill anyone though.
Didn't she? We don't know. She had her little notebook. It was color coded.
Oh, but was she? Oh,
I feel like she didn't.
I didn't sense that.
You go.
But I wanted. I was like, oh, there's blood on her, and then it turned out to be like ketchup.
Ketchup.
It was like,
I
oh,
know. I was
damn
like,
it!
no,
Like,
I
but
thought she was gonna kill that guy.
oh, yeah, I was gonna like, Koumbie, do you remember there was something? I'm really bad with memory, but you were touching on timeline, sitting with it.
Deadline for yourself.
Being done with it.
Being done with it. Yeah,
You-
maybe it'll come back.
I'll ask another question, but if that comes back, then at any point jump in. For all of you, did you ever audience test your work? Maybe Scott, I'll start with you. Did you show a rough cut or at any stage get feedback from people?
I did
Other than your editor, of course.
yeah, because like and Andrew McCormick, who I just love, and he is a cinematographer and editor, and he said, yeah, like of course people are gonna say that they like it, that those that love you, and I'm like, so I for the longest time I just didn't believe if someone liked it that they didn't like afterwards, but he's right, and so I actually reached out to someone on Instagram that was an actress from London that I loved in Midsummer, named Laura Torchia. She's the of course the couple of color like die first, but she's the one that like goes and her partner has like gone to gone to the station. And she's like, what? And so I contacted her and I just said, would you be open to, because she was posting about doing that with friends, and similar to like Michaela Cole does that, where she has people come like screenwriters and just they have dinner and talk about people's scripts. Like, can you imagine? And so and she's like, I would love to. And she watched it. And she said, yeah, she had feedback, and she said she thought it was great, she said, I think this should just be sound design, no music. And I was like, great, but I've hired a musician, and they're my friends, and like, so the music was just so sparing. But I wanted it to be, like, I was like, I don't want a huge score, but that was hard, because I was like, she's an actress, she knows, like, film, like, way more than I do, and so, but that was really it. I showed it to a couple other people, but yeah, I'm not saying that I didn't respect their opinion. I did, but of note, she's in the industry more.
You
But
just respect her more than you respect your friends.
yeah, but then
What do you mean?
yeah. So audience test, as in like a group of people together. No, I didn't do that.
So when you sent her or the couple of people that you mentioned, was that a rough cut or a locked picture?
No, it was not a locked picture. It was a rough cut before the music and sound component started.
So you were looking for feedback before you got to locked picture to make sure.
Yeah,
Were
exactly.
you mainly trying to see if stuff didn't make sense?
Yeah,
Or something
she
like
said
that?
she liked the pacing, and then she said, but like, I wouldn't, if I were you, add music. And that was the second time someone had said that, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. I was looking forward to that the most, and it ended up being the most fruitful part. But
And Tara, what about you? Like, at what stage did you ask anyone for notes? Script stage or rough cut or ever at all?
Oh, yeah, rough cut. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing to do. You're like, here's a movie that I would like you to look at as a movie that you would go see in the theaters. Yet there's no sound design. There's no music. I am yelling the texts from off screen, which are not on screen yet because we haven't done that part. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me what doesn't
Don't let
work.
that bring you out of
Yeah,
your
yeah.
experience.
Like, it's
still just a
wildly
normal
variant.
movie.
There's street, like, we shot on the street a lot, tons of like, it was. Anyway, that was the hardest week of my life in terms of the actual production, because you're just like,
Wait, what was when you were sending it out for
yeah,
notes?
get it, yeah. And we got some great feedback, but I also found, like you, I would say when I was starting in the shoot, I was a lot less sure of myself, and I'm insecure in general, but certainly kind of happy to let people do what they do and not interfere too much, but the deeper I got into production, the more I knew the movie, I was much more resistant to ideas. And so one of the ones that kept coming up was, so she is attacking these men at night, and they're all played by the same actor, and he's wearing the same outfit every time. So there was a concern that came up a few times. It's like, are we going to know this is a different person? And how do we know that this guy is the guy? And a couple people said, why don't you just like put up the email that she got about him on the screen and like a little dossier? And I was like, no, no. Just sort of these identifying factors. And I felt like I had that. I was like, I know you don't see it, but I have it. It's going to be okay. It has never come up in any review or audience person. No one has ever said, I didn't understand why she attacked that guy. Like, not one time. So
You went with your gut.
I went with my gut, like you did with the music. And I think there's absolutely, like, the feedback process is so valuable because you need people outside the organization, as it were, to chime in, but you also need to trust yourself. And it's hard to know when, especially when you're new.
Yeah, because there's a danger in taking too many notes. You
Yeah,
take
and then it's not your
everybody's
movie
notes,
anymore.
And then it's not
Yeah.
your movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mishmash of other people's ideas. Yeah, that's what I did on my first short film, and I hate it. I'm like, this isn't the movie I wanted. The movie I would have made probably would have sucked too, but at least it would have been my my sucking and not just
And you're
other people's notes on the screen.
And you're really great at giving notes because you'll always say, when you give it, you're like, here's what I would do. I know you might not do it, or I don't think it's your style. Like when you know
Yeah,
it might
like,
conflict
just
with.
because I would do this, but
Yeah.
I'm a different filmmaker than you, and
Yeah.
this is your voice and not my
Yeah,
voice.
which is nice. Which is a nice way to give notes. If anyone ever asks you, sort of like always keep the perspective of the artist in mind.
I love the phrase, "This is my offering to you." When I heard that the first time, like, that is really beautiful. And
Yeah, this is my offering. Like, you don't have to take it, but it's on the table if you want it. Yeah. What about you, Koumbie? Did you show a rough cut or even a script stage to people? Were you worried about how people would react at any point?
I actually feel like you could probably do an entire panel on the feedback process. I feel like it is so dangerous a time. It is a very sensitive time. It is like, yeah, if you show it too early, how does that change things, and when there's no sound design? But then if you show it too late, it's like, I think that can really do your head in. I did show people. We sent screeners. Our producer had a list of people that she sent to. Our editor had people that she sent it to. I had people. So we did send it.
You rescinded my offer. Koumbie texted me, would you watch the movie? And I didn't answer quick enough. And then you were like, never mind.
Oh no! Then you get back to her and you're like, yeah. She's like, nope.
I wimped out. But here's my
Because you were
here's my
scared,
rationale.
Tara.
I didn't
You're
know
scared
Tara
for
as
them.
well back then. I respected her, and I had worked on her movie, and I really respected her opinion. But it was just in a place where it was like getting certain feedback probably would have killed me, and I knew that I had to like protect my psyche. And so we decided to we had like a very, very long list of people to send it to, and then we probably chopped it in half because we just felt like we knew the movie that we wanted to make. We also knew what we had shot. So that's like another tricky part when you're sending it to folks, because if they're like, what about a scene about this? It's like, we don't.
It would help if there was a wide shot. Well, we didn't shoot
Like,
a wide shot.
there
that's
isn't,
not
or like-
not a helpful note.
And Amy and I have really gone through like with a fine tooth comb. I kind of wish if we, like all the feedback sessions we've done, I might have moved them up a little bit, because there were times like when we showed it to folks and it was like we had gone through things with a fine tooth comb. And so when they said anything about like, oh, this beat or this moment, it was like, we know that one didn't work because of sound, or we know that one didn't work because there was like all of those things.
I'm gonna play you again. How long is that list in the end of people that you
That we sent it to?
Yeah.
Well, I could look at the special thanks and, and go through what that was.
Roughly, it was like 5 people, or
No,
20?
no, it was definitely more than that. I had like 2 screenings like with a few friends, so I could watch it live with people, because I felt like that would be
Oh,
important.
that's so scary.
Yeah. And then we like sent off screeners. So I'm gonna say like maybe 15 people throughout the.
And at
throughout
what
the
point
process.
were you like, this is too many cooks in the kitchen, or did you feel that way? How did you
never-
compile the feedback? And
Well, it was always like we would watch, and then I would take notes and then send it, and then we would like compile the notes. And so some notes, I just immediately were like, no. No one has any context for this because the movie hasn't screened yet. But there was a character who has like a very strong opinion, and I could tell almost immediately if folks sort of like saw that person and was like, I know who this is, and then didn't listen to what she was saying.
Like who she was in real life?
Well, just no, not who she was in real life, but who the character was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where it was
Which
like,
would have been me, just as a side note.
yeah. I love her. Anyway, so then you kind of like filter the notes through that lens, if that makes sense. It was like sending it to men was different than sending it to women, I will say. That was the thing, that like certain feedback was more common.
that could be a doctoral
It's
dissertation.
It was interesting. It was very
Were there any repeated notes that you were like, because often when repeated notes, you're like, this, I should probably maybe consider this, that you were like, no.
So Taylor and I, I'll say Taylor has this thing where like if you get a note 3 times, you have to take it really seriously, which I would say I agree with. That being said, there was one note, which Tara also had when she saw it after it was done, that we definitely got more than 3 times, and I kept it in. And I was like, no.
Oh, and I think you should have kept it in. Yeah.
Can we say what it is without giving it away? Not really.
Absolutely not.
No. I think I know the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there is a moment in your film, without giving things away, that is very polarizing, controversial, maybe you would say. So at no point did you want to take that out. You knew that for sure. That was important to you to keep that in. Were you, or are you, because you haven't shown it yet, afraid of how people will react? Or do you ever wish you'd like taken it back a little bit or even pushed the envelope further?
I feel like the cooler answer would be like, no, I always knew and I always stuck to my guns and I never had a second thought about it at all. But that's not true. I was quite confident in it, and then actually our lead actor had some questions about it, and that was the only time in the whole process that I had to really like dig deep and figure out like why I was fighting for this so hard, because she was in it and I respect the hell out of her because she's brilliant, and so that was the first time. But in that conversation, I actually walked away feeling better about it than ever. But yeah, that was
You
probably.
knew you had something to stand behind.
Yeah.
People might not agree, but this is the answer I have for you.
Yeah,
This is
I
why
think
it's here.
it kind of ties into like one of the things I think directing is, which is like my ability to communicate my vision. And then if you have a different idea, we have to be able to communicate to figure out which one's the best one. And if I'm not able to like verbalize that properly or communicate that properly, then that's on me. And I like, that's my job. So that was an opportunity I got to be like, can I explain to you why this is so important in a way that makes sense? And that doesn't mean you agree with it, but in a way that you can sort of accept. So that was
And
nice.
like you can sleep at night knowing that you know that. Like I've been in situations before where I've written something controversial or something, and then I'm like, can I stand behind this if I get this question in the Q&A? And then after I come up with the why is this important? Why do I want to say it? And then I'm like, okay, now I can sleep at night. Because if I don't know the answer to that, then I guess I'm just trying to be controversial.
Yeah,
with
I love that.
nothing,
And
then
it's so
that
funny you
seems-
said thinking about like what the Q&A is like.
Yeah, I'm always like, okay,
love
what are
that.
the worst things people can ask me in the Q&A, and can I stand behind what I just put on the screen?
This isn't like anywhere near like as controversial, I guess, as like the topics you covered, but in terms of like the disability community and like I was always scared. I was like really worried about how it would be received, and you know, because it's a disabled, you know, writer director who went through this trauma, and yes, disability is a part of it, but there's like, you know, horrific violence that I mean, you don't see the violence, you see the aftermath, and I was really worried that it would be written off as just like, oh well, it's just another sad like trauma porn story about disability, and there definitely are there. We have a lot of them, but they're written and directed by non-disabled people, and I then was like, okay, you just have to let that go and prepare your answer, but that's like, I'm sure there are people that left thinking like, well, but I was like, I'm not the advocate or the representative for the biggest minority that we have in the world. Like disabled people make up 25% of the world. So it's like, and all the intersections they're in. So I'm not it was kind of freeing, but it's not. But I do remember like along those lines, just being like, I'm afraid what they're going to think.
I think that's so important for folks who live within the margins, we'll say, or like outside. Like marginalized folks are often expected to speak for everyone.
We're not a monolith.
And I think you just like, yeah, you have to shed that, or it's like, I have found it paralyzing in the past. I like that point.
Yeah, well, Scott, I was going to ask you what your biggest fear was, and it kind of sounds like was that sort of your biggest fear, which is something I would ask any like first-time filmmaker, because this was your first directorial debut, right? So, but especially because yours is the topic that you're exploring and you're on screen. Was that your biggest fear? Is how the disabled community would react?
No, I think it was. In general, I mean, it relates to that, but like I know Vivek Shraya talks about like trauma clown, and I love it's totally true. You know, why do marginalized people have to like excavate their trauma and turn it into art in order to be heard and like in order to get grant money and like all these things? And I totally agree with it. And then at the same time, I'm like, I think this trauma is so huge that I need to turn to art and chip away at it in any way that I can. And I'm in the like selfish phase where I'm like, I'm gonna do it the way that I want to do it, and I don't care. But before I kind of reached that empowering feeling, I was just like, people are gonna. And on cue, actually, I was interviewed about the play, I Forgive You. That's that just premiered in Newfoundland, and the questioning was so bizarre. It was like, why did you accept, thinking like you just did the film, why, like, it was kind of insinuating like it could be harmful, and it's true. But I was just like, but this is my life. No, after doing the film, like the documentary, and all of these three things are about this, the effects of this attack. And it was a question that was like, kind of like, why, were you scared? Like, and why would you accept, another project on it? And I get it. And I think I won't do another project on my own, like, direct trauma again. But I was like, that's such a personal, invasive thing of like, because I want to chip away at the trauma. Like,
I disagree. So, when I did my first like directing workshop, the instructor started it by saying like, first thing we're gonna figure out is what's your shit, and she had this whole thing about like, what's your shit. Think about anything that you've made, any artistic, creative thing that you've done. There's probably a through line in there, and that's probably what your shit is. And it's like really great. I think probably my shit has changed, but it was like, oh yeah, there is this like through line. I feel like we're gonna be working through our shit for the rest of time. Like the idea to be like, and now, are you done?
Like, you only
like,
get
is
3
that enough?
projects
It's
to
like
work
no.
on that issue, and then you have to do
It's a
other issues.
lifelong thing.
Yeah,
so my fear was like, people are gonna look at me like this. Oh my God, he's so like self-masochistic, and like, I just was like, no, this is just, yeah. And to speak to that, like, some people say don't start from here, and like, I'm like, there's no way. That's so
Where else are you
impossible.
supposed to start from?
I
I
know.
don't understand.
And even if you like do a story that's completely different, which like the comedy, I've written to comedy, and it's like, it's still related. That's not me, but like, that's me. I don't know.
But you're the artist and you have the voice, so you should be in the work you're making. I guess you have to be in the work you're making. Even if you're like in a writing room working on a sitcom or something, you probably would still have your life experiences and perspectives in your work. Tara, I'll ask you about your. I feel like I know the answer to this, but were you ever worried about showing this film and how some people would react? Were you worried about how men would react?
Oh, never. I don't care. She knew I would say that. No, I wasn't, but I will tell you about something that happened to us. So we went to Fantasia Festival, and so it was Leslie, the lead, and I were there representing the movie. And someone came up to me afterward and said, the movie made me very uncomfortable. So the opening scenes, she's being followed. It looks like she's being followed home, and then it turns out she's not. But that's how we frame it. And she said, I come from a town in Mexico where there are 10 femicides a day. So if someone follows you home, you generally don't make it. And I said, oh. And then she said, can I have a selfie, like with me? And I was like, yes. And usually I say no. I was like, I don't know how to transmit this information. I'm like, thank you for being here. So then Leslie and I went to a bar later, like with the programmer, and so this was hours after the screening. I do not remember seeing this person. He came up to us and he said, my name is, I'm sorry, I don't remember, but he said, my cousin was murdered by her husband. He was an NFL player. He's in jail. He's been there for 20 years. And I know she sent me to see the movie. And I was like, okay. I am not equipped. I have no training to deal with femicide. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a social worker. Like, I don't know how to react to people talking to me.
Maybe you didn't like really expect that.
No, because ultimately our
that people would be now going to say this stuff.
Yeah, because I pitch it as this fun vigilante concept, but it's ultimately about domestic violence, and there's a domestic violence sort of scene at the end, and I just didn't. It just never factored into the way that people would receive the film. So it was just surprising.
Now that you have experienced that, when you look back, do you feel like would you have done something differently? Would you have pushed the envelope more in any other way, or?
No, I don't think so. I think the movie's the movie. I think I just would have I don't know if either of you can relate to this, but since I shot the movie, all I think about is what I did wrong. And one of the things that I think we only half did well was when shooting that scene which depicts domestic violence. It's the aftermath. There's very little violence in the movie. It was the end of the night on day 2, so I was brand new to direct it. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was very stressed out. There had been a snowstorm. We were all in this house all day long. People shoving me around. I mean, they weren't like actively like, get out of the way. Like they were just like nudging me when they went by. There was no place to sit, like to be quiet. And it's a very important scene to the movie, and I was so stressed out about it. And the AD did say, if you can't be here for this, take the time and go.
I said that to the crew.
To everyone, because our crew was 95% women. Like there were 2 men on crew and 1 in the cast. So that means statistically, there were domestic violence and sexual assault survivors in the room. And we just sort of said, kind of identify yourself and walk away if you need it. So they're not gonna do that. No one was gonna do it. So now that and you know, my projects moving forward are not as serious, but one of the things I regret is that we should have had some sort of meeting or some sort of conversation that was more formal, maybe, or like just approach it differently than just sort of like yelling it into the air. Like, if you need a minute, take it. Like, so I regret that.
I see what you're saying, because it sounds like a kind, thoughtful thing to do, just to say you may excuse yourself, but you're right, I hadn't thought of that. Then by excusing yourself, you're identifying yourself as...
Yeah. I mean, we did put in a practice where I said, you know, this is a huge scene for the actors, and I do not want anyone walking around. Like, it was the end of the night, it was the end of the week. People want to leave. No one wants to work past when they're getting paid, all that stuff. And I understand that. But I think sometimes, and I'm sure you can relate, we forget about what we're here to do. And the actors are not always getting the respect that they deserve. So I'm like, we are doing this thing where someone has to cry on command every take, and we did 10 takes. You know, and it was just like, when it was over, you could hear a pin drop. Like, people showed up with the respect. But sometimes looking back, I'm like, okay, I would have done that a bit differently.
Scott, I want to compliment you on something I think you did really beautifully in your film. I think it's really hard to portray anxiety on screen, and I think you did a really, really great job of that, so I wanted to give you that compliment. That and anxiety and other emotions. Like, as a viewer, I was reading that the character you were playing was feeling a lot of anxiety, maybe kind of anxiety attack at one point, feeling maybe shame, frustration, anger. These are all things that are really easy to write on a page or in a novel or even express, but you weren't saying it. Like, there wasn't dialogue. I am now feeling anxious, which would be the easy way. It was all no dialogue, and not all, but those scenes were often not a lot of dialogue, and so I wanted to compliment you on that and ask you, what do you hope people walk away feeling after they see your film?
I mean, this was a high hope, and I don't think people necessarily will, but I was like, and you know when you like write it and you like rely, I remember my question now, but about the script, and then you like, you what's that phrase about like the script, just adhering to the script, and if you have a good script, it'll work itself out, you know, like whatever, but you film things and it's like, oh, that is not clear. I thought that was like very clear, and then I see it and it's like, no, that isn't clear to me, like that the laundry was like dyed blue because of the sweater in the wash, you know, and it was white towels. And so the symbolism was really important to me in those moments, where like the fact that bled into his life and like anything like that. And I want people to view, and that's my fear, is that people watch it and be like, this is just trauma porn. I want people to view disability as a social construct instead of like an individual problem. It is a societal problem in terms of like ableism and barriers and things like that. So some people who don't understand disability or aren't around it will see that staircase scene and me like transferring down and like breaking down as like, oh, this is just pity, sad, like, oh, such a shame, like so horrible. and then they'll leave, and let's get it like McDonald's, and it's like, no, but like that's a barrier, and maybe that's something you've seen told by non-disabled creators, but like this is more nuanced in the sense that it's like I actually live that, and that's actually like true. I just wanted to go out for air, and the elevator was broken down, and I see someone who's able-bodied to walk down, and they don't give a shit. And it's like, if we give a shit more and like see that as like, oh yeah, there's very real barriers for these people who live with disabilities, and see it as in a different light. But I don't think that's a high hope, because that's not the theme. Trauma and like grief is the theme, but it's like it's framed by the fact that this character's isolated and can't go anywhere when they want to go outside. And in the hallways, you see like on the walls like nature and like beautiful nature, and like you can't get to that because you're on the 3rd floor and the elevator's broken down, and it happens all the time. But that's my hope, is that it'll click in that way, and that like this is a thing that like is real. And ableism, I hope people will look up on Google and learn it, because it's not even in people's heads yet. It's like we're not there. But
And you showed it for the first time just last night or night before, right? That was the first time you showed it to an audience?
no, it screened in London, England, in March. So this is the 7th,
Okay, I'm sorry
maybe.
about-
No.
I got my information wrong. Sorry about that. But so
This was the
what
hardest.
your-
This was the scariest.
Sorry?
Yeah. This was the scariest
The
for me.
scariest, just because it was like
Home
ground?
ground, yeah. I was terrified.
So what has? I mean, I understand
Sorry.
what you're saying. Don't be scared or anything.
That's a
Koumbie. It was
feature.
totally
I'm
fine.
like, I can't even imagine. But I'm so excited for you.
Scott's like, at least it wasn't my first feature or anything. I don't remember what I was going to say next. What about you, Tara? What do you think? I'm going to go to Koumbie because I skipped you last time. What do you think? What do you hope people think and feel when they walk away from your movie, which is on Thursday?
I've already made this joke, but I hope they walk going, what a well-made film. She should really get funding for another one. We should really give her some money to make another movie. But in terms of the actual film, I think my answer on this sort of changes regularly. And today I'm feeling a little bit like, in some ways, I think Taylor and I made this movie for ourselves. It was like we had a lot of questions, and I know I was getting frustrated sort of by all of it, like just all of it. Like this, I was just getting frustrated by this because either it was like, kill all men and like they all just like are bad and need to move away and all of these things, or it was like, no, they don't. They're people. They're good.
Hashtag not all men.
Hashtag not, and it like both sides were making me mad and didn't feel right. So in some ways, it's just a movie of like, what do we do? So now I'm grappling with the fact that other people are going to watch the movie other than me. And I don't know. It's a movie, and I think if you can take something from it, maybe if you were on the far end of any one of those sides, maybe it helps bring you a little bit closer to something else. I don't know.
Survivors aren't a monolith, too. Really.
Yeah.
They're not.
Sorry,
Oh, yeah, that's a
survivors
big.
aren't what?
But the
That's a
survivors
part of it.
survivors aren't a monolith. Like disability.
Yeah.
How important was it for you, Koumbie, to have the different perspectives in there? Because I feel like you have a perspective of what you believe and think, but you co-wrote this with Taylor, but how hard or how difficult was it to get into the mindset of other people that you don't agree with and have to write their
sucked.
perspective?
It sucked. It sucked, and then sometimes it was fun because nothing brings me greater joy. One of the things that brings me a lot of joy is shocking Taylor. and like surprising him. So sometimes, because we would like pass the laptop back and forth, and when we were writing together sometimes, and so sometimes I would like write something that was just like crazy, and then pass it to him, and then like watch his eyes be like. And that was really, really satisfying. So in that way, it was like sometimes it was, you know, what's the opposite of how I feel, or like what's the argument I've heard that's really annoyed me, and then other times it was like actual questions that I had shame around having, like things that I felt like I shouldn't wonder about or think about, and so like getting to put those into someone's voice.
Like, I don't think this way, but this character
But
does.
like they,
I never thought that way.
Well,
Yeah.
like,
But
yeah,
it's somewhere
a little
to go,
bit.
like something, I've totally done that too, where it's like, this is something I'm ashamed of. I hope no one ever hears me. I would never say this out loud. You write it into a piece of fiction, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's fake. What are you
But
talking
also,
about?
it was really cathartic to have someone say something that I completely disagreed with, and get to have someone else be like, "You bitch!" Like,
Right.
how
They
could you
win the
possibly say
argument or
that? And
something?
like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I feel like I was kind of arguing with myself a little bit. I think Taylor, similarly, but maybe less so than me.
And then he had to play the character on screen of the
Yeah, he really didn't want
in a
to.
version of a person that he wouldn't.
He really didn't want
He
to do
didn't have
it.
the same thoughts and feelings as that character. But he's an actor. He can pretend.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing for time, but let me take a look. Does anyone have any questions for anybody over here?
Were there any like producing challenges, like any moments in the film where you had like an obstacle?
Producing challenges.
Every
producing
single day.
obstacles. They were all pretty low, but I mean, I know relatively kind of what the budgets were, at least for these two. Scott, I don't know if you were working on a low budget or medium budget for yours, but
In post, there was support from Canada Council that was
Nice.
very, like, I was like surprised, but everything else, yeah, barely in. Or sorry, in kind donations of like artist time, and very low budget to start for sure.
so I guess there's probably a lot of producing challenges, especially when it comes to lower budgets. Is there anything specific that we want to get into about that?
Trying to think of how fast I could answer the
I
question.
have one.
I will just say on the budget note, one of the hilarious things was that our producer, or like folks would say, you know, how low budget it was and how we didn't have a lot of money. And like I work on no budget projects a lot, or micro budget projects a lot. So for me, our set was like luxury.
Like, wow, there's
there was
a
like
craft table.
there was a craft table that had different things on it every day. Like this is mind blowing to me.
Was it a sound stage, or was it you were at
No, we shot
actual-
on location.
Okay.
Yeah, we shot on location in Enfield, which was great.
Shout out East Hants. I'm from Lance.
I'm just to answer your specific question about production issues. There was a snowstorm on like day 2. One of our cast got COVID on day 3. Then like 4 more of our cast got COVID on like the next week. We were like constantly dealing with schedules changing and whatever was thrown at us. There was spoiler, it happens very early in the movie, but there's a skinny dipping scene that was supposed to be at dusk. And so all of my conversations, all of our intimacy conversations were all around, you know, we're going to be pretty far away. It's going to be pretty dark. It's going to be more silhouettes, all of these things. And then because COVID pushed us back a week, we ended up hitting up against like a fly fishing season or something. And all of a sudden we were shooting on a lake, and all of a sudden every dusk, all of these people would show up to like fish. So we were like, well, we can't really shoot this skinny dipping scene into a crowd of fishing people. So that was a production challenge, and that was difficult because it meant that we were going to be changing the plan entirely. So we had to like go and kind of rehab a bunch of those conversations and make sure folks were comfortable with the plan changing and things like that. Those are all the ones I can think of off the top of my head.
COVID and lighting.
COVID and lighting, and yeah.
I had to rewrite my ending 4 days out. So there was always this scene at the end, and my producer's wonderful, Nicole Steves, but I like to remind her this was always there from the very beginning. So at the end of the movie, I think I can say it because it didn't happen. There's like a revolution of women on the street. She comes out, and there's women everywhere. And we weren't talking about it, and we weren't talking about it. And then like a week out at lunch, I was like, okay, so the revolution. And Nicole's like, yeah, we talked about it. We're going to bring all the actors back. And I was like, Nicole, that's 5 people. It's not enough people. And
It's written on the page like
it's
the whole
like
street is
yeah, like
filled
we're
with
gonna
women.
be down in the middle while they walk by, and she was like, where are we gonna? We can't feed them. Where are we gonna put them? And I was like, these are not my problems. But anyway, so it was like this weird thing where we kind of put a pin in it. She's like, just leave it with me. And then 2 days, the Sunday before our final week, our cinematographer DM'd me and said, I can't shoot the revolution the way we talked about it. She was going to steady cam it. You can't just pick up a steady cam and go shoot a thing. So she didn't have enough experience. She didn't feel confident that she could do it. I was like, well, the 2 people that I need to make this happen have just told me it cannot. So here we go. That's right. So we went to AIFF22 to shoot one scene where someone presses a button on a photocopier. I was working there at the time. So I was sitting at my desk like rewriting the ending, waiting for them to set that up. And then I just had to run it by all the actors to make sure that, like, because we took lines away from Leslie and stuff like that. So, and we did it differently. But that was, and Jason Eisner told me the same thing happened to him, and it made me feel a lot better because he had a bigger budget than I did and is a lot more experienced than I am. So I'm just like, okay, can happen to anyone.
I'll just say, being on the inside, I loved that day so much because it meant all of us got to like be together. It was
Right, which
actually,
was
really
the only
beautiful.
time it happened. Yeah, and it was like we had 6 people in our whole movie, but it was usually only 2 people at a time. And then that last day was a cacophonous day of all of you. I loved it too.
What about you, Scott?
Just location stuff. It was just like, okay, and snowstorm, but like the snowstorm worked in our favor.
Same.
Yeah.
all had snowstorms. and you're not-
We went on day 2. Yeah.
My
Big
snowstorm
one.
eventually felt like a blessing.
For us, it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, didn't expect it, and it affected lighting, but it was still like, I don't know. But a location fell through the day before, 2 days before, but everything else kind of was, I was working with a really great team, so nothing else in that sense. But it was crushing. I was like, no, we need. And like, what is wrong with you? But also, having to rewrite, and adjust in the moment and be like, oh, this thing that I really loved, I'm now gonna have to let it go. That's hard, and I don't. know
And
how
there's
to
no
deal with that.
time to fight it. Like I could have cried or yelled or tried to push back, but it was just so
It's
obvious.
not like if you cry enough, then suddenly they'll have the
You're like,
budget
yeah.
to do it. Like you're not going to
It's like,
change it.
if
yeah.
I just sit here for 2 hours, this will change. So you have to roll with it.
I don't know. When I was told I couldn't come to set because insurance wouldn't let me because I tested positive for COVID like 3 days after everyone else did. So even though my doctor said it was fine, or the walk-in clinic doctor said it was fine, my symptom, I still like wasn't going to be allowed to be on the premises, and I wouldn't say I threw a temper tantrum.
This is on film, remember.
It-
So people on
it
your set
wasn't-
will see this.
Well, no one saw anything. Taylor's the only one who saw what I did because all of my interactions with everyone else was like chill. I was chill by then, but I did lose it. And so I got my doctor's note and then I drove to set. And so then they did let me. So it kind of worked out because they let me direct from the car.
I was gonna ask, did you do it from a distance?
I directed from the car. Yeah, I don't recommend
That's
it.
sweet. You get to sit down though.
And I had to bring
you're
my dog.
standing. Yeah.
My dog hung out with me in the car all day.
In like the heat or the air conditioning or whatever time of year it is, it's sounds like luxurious.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're almost out of time here. Oh, there's a question right here. Sorry, about what? Writing different perspectives, yeah.
So I was wondering, like, when you were writing characters with different perspectives, did you gain empathy for like a different perspective? Or, like, did you write it more removed? Or
I'm going to repeat the question just because the camera won't pick that up. But did you, by writing the different perspectives, gain empathy from a point of view that you didn't agree with? Is that kind of the question?
If either of you have answers, I will.
I didn't do that.
I feel like that's really
It's on me. Okay, good.
Sorry, buddy.
Yes, I will say yes and no. I think I had to try and understand Justin in a way that I was like quite reluctant to do in order to make the movie the way that we wanted to.
For those who haven't
Oh,
seen
yeah.
the movie, who is that?
Justin did the bad thing. Um, Justin, I can't say is the bad guy, but is the bad guy. And I really had to think about like, okay, what are his reasonings? Because when we were figuring out like what his arguments are, we had to actually figure out what his arguments were. So I found that quite difficult, but I think it did make me sort of understand like all of these systemic things that happened to this person that made him think he felt entitled. So it didn't make me like empathize, but I think I did understand a little bit more. But then it sort of also went like the other way, because in post, when like we put in all these Easter eggs, my dream is that you watch it one time and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you watch it again and you like see all these bits that sort of explain how he would feel entitled to do these things. So then I kind of went the other way, because I was like, no, because at every, all of these times, like you had all of these opportunities to not be this guy. So then so yes and no.
Which is my number one problem with the scene that I hate.
What time is your film, Koumbie?
6:30.
Till 8:30?
Thursday.
I think so. Can you come?
I really want to.
Okay. I can send you a screen.
I think we're almost done. Is there one more question to take, maybe? Yep.
Did your attacker ever any remorse, apologize, anything?
Well,
Do you want to speak about your attacker?
Yeah, I don't know if we can have a conversation privately afterwards.
Would it make your film any different?
Probably, but the answer is yes in court.
What? That's okay. No, thank you for asking. All questions are welcome, but I think we're good here. No, we're not good. Okay, so I'm trying to read what Greg's saying. We'll take another question. Is that what you're saying? One more question. Oh yeah, right over here.
Yeah. Effortlessly, yeah. The fear, the worry of like where that was going was like it came up. I was like, oh, here we go. This is what I was preparing myself for. Like this,
know where the question
possibly like it will turn to like that was like pitying and why were you, but thank you for that, because that's the greatest gift. They don't realize what we're saying, like the social construct of disability and how it's that people will leave the theater and they won't think they'll forget that fact that like, oh yeah, stairs. But we need to be, every one of us with any kind of ability or disability should be thinking about, oh yeah, this is a world that's not constructed for everyone. This is a world that like isolates so many people. It's very lonely. And if only like we should, like what does it look like to be an ally for people who can't get out of their house to protest these things? So, and that's kind of what I wanted people to feel, at least the pain and connect it. And my regret is like, I don't think that was like super clear, but I'm really happy that yeah. Okay, thank you. Yep, I do, and can I just like there's a push, and I said this at the intro. There's a push right now for like positive narratives on disability, and I think that's really important and valid. But I find it really also frustrating when it erases disabled voices that want to do exactly what non-disabled voices are like take up space doing, which is exploring sad narratives. Like they're allowed to. I think we should be allowed to explore and create sad narratives about our grief and talk about disabled grief. And everyone's like, so much mourning. Yeah, acquired disability has a different kind of grief than like congenital. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the camera probably didn't pick up a lot of that audio, and I obviously won't repeat it all, but you made this audience member feel very seen with your work, which I imagine is a very touching thing to hear. So thank you for sharing that. Is there any other questions for anybody? Right here, and then we'll go there. Oh, schooling. Where did you all learn how to be filmmakers? Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to school for film, and it's one of those things that's super inaccessible, and you just really need that first short film to like get funding for it. Yeah, but I'm doing, I'm apparently doing a PhD in music education right now at U of T. But I'm like, this is more fun, and I love like yeah. So you can do it. I'm 36, and I had big insecurities about it, but I just kept reading that quote about Maya Angelou and how she like started when she was like 52, and like I'm just like okay, or like Toni Morrison, and I'm just like, don't let that prevent you. I think if you're creative, why, like, everyone's creative, but everyone, because of capitalism, it puts commodification on creativity, and I think that's bullshit.
Are you a student currently? Okay. May I ask where? Cool. Oh.
Dive in.
I abandoned my BA in English at St. Mary's. And I turned 43 today. And
Tara's birthday.
thank you so much. And I wanted to make movies since I was in high school, and I started when I turned 40. So that my advice, as yours is don't wait. There's no reason to. You can go to film school and acquire all the technical things, but guess what? You're not going to do all the technical things. You hire people to do that for you. Let them do it. That's how I feel about it. And then, so it's like, I'm a student of life.
Yeah, I also didn't go to school for filmmaking. I think my way in was as an actor. I went to Concordia for 1 year, and then I deferred, but I never went back, so I guess I dropped out. I struggle with this because sometimes I do like talks in schools or for classes, and what I used to say was always like, you can do it, but you have to be prepared for the hustle. And like there's a hustle and a grind that is required to break into an industry that like, frankly, has so many barriers in every possible way. I think there's like a huge financial barrier for sure when you're starting, especially if you want to be in like the creative sort of like above the line positions. Now that I'm like, fuck hustle culture and all of these things, I'm like, is there a way that you can still do it without that burnout and like that grind that I think so many of us had to experience? And I'm not 100% sure. I hope that there is, and there's a way to change that. But currently I'm still like, absolutely, you don't need school.
Debt. Debt.
I was sitting and I was debating the same thing about whether or not I wanted to go into school. And I was on a film set, and they all had gone to school. And I was like, well, maybe I should. And then they were like, yeah, but the only thing school gave us was meeting these people, and you're on the set and you've met these people, so you don't need it. But I do think in terms of like networking, like, because nepotism is still so real in the industry, especially here. It's like so many people are just hiring the folks that they know, and so it's like extra hard to jump in. So I still think that there is like, you have to be a go-getter. You have to like talk to people you don't know and ask to be on their sets. And I think you still have to sort of work on sets for like on those low budget on the weekends.
Film fives.
Film
Film
fives.
fives. Labs.
I work at AIFF22, and I will, yeah, it's like AIFF22 has tons of training, and it's super accessible now. A lot of the fees have been knocked completely out. And
yeah, that's true. They
and that's
changed
how
that.
you learn.
That's really
Like,
nice.
it's a really great place to just gather experience on a wide range of projects, and a wide range of people work on them. Like, total professionals are like, yeah, I'll do a shoot a film 5. And then, like, so it's a wide range of, like, all kinds of people with all kinds of experience like you. So that's, instead of, like, putting a bunch of money into a degree, that's a good way to do it.
I wouldn't say English is a huge leap at all. Like, you're learning about writing and like story. I think that's, yeah. Labs. And right now, all there's virtual. Take advantage of labs because you don't have to like travel to Whistler or wherever it may be.
I would love to go to Whistler.
I think we're really lucky to be in a country where there's grants like they are. Because in Hollywood, like I just did a disabled filmmakers lab in LA. I spent a lot of money just to realize I never want to make a movie here. I never want to make a movie like this. I never want to live here. And I came back and was like, thank God for like Telefilm, Canada Council, like accent, these, yeah. Because there's so much money in Hollywood, but everyone's like fighting for it, and like the pipeline and networking and pitching. And if I heard that one more time, I was gonna vomit. So I was like, okay.
I should say it's really a good thing that we are not sponsored today by NASCAD or NSCC, because everybody on our panel is like
down with
fuck
film school.
And are there any teachers here right now? Okay, thank goodness. Okay,
I was doing a film minor, by the way. It doesn't matter. I didn't get it.
I think we.
Yeah, not the same. It's film production.
I'm just trying to wrap up. We're done
We've been
now.
trying to wrap up for half an hour.
No, it's been really, really lovely to speak to all of you. You've all made beautiful films.
Thank you,
Very
Stephanie.
important. All three of them very important topics that we should be discussing and we should be seeing on screen. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you all for coming out today. This is really interesting and fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Stephanie.